So, welcome back. And it is a true privilege to welcome Professor Jorge Mestre. He's an associate professor at the Universidad Carlos III de Madrid, and he's an independent health economic researcher and consultant since 2017, based in Madrid. He spent 15 years at the Office of Health Economics, starting as an industrial economist and finishing as director of consulting. He has spent more than 20 years in consulting in the life science industry and related nonprofit organizations, and his clients and collaborators have included many global top 30 pharmaceutical companies, public sector organizations, international bodies, and a range of NGOs, including OCDE, the Medical Research Council, Wellcome Trust, Academy of Medical Science, and FPA, the Association of the European Federation of Pharmaceutical Industry and Associations. He specializes in the economics of the industry, the pricing and reimbursement of medicines, the impact of public policy on R&D and innovation, R&D costs of new medicines, market access, the economics of rare diseases and orphan medicines, the economics of AMR, and pharmaceutical product portfolios. He recently co-authored two technical reports from the WHO Oslo Medicines Initiative. He has a PhD in economic analysis from the University Autonoma of Barcelona, and he's an associate senior research fellow at the Science Policy Research Unit in the University of Sussex, and amongst other, also a visiting fellow at the Office of Health Economics. And I can go on and on. I think indeed it is already clear that we face a true expert here. Thank you for being with us and taking us on a journey to how we can incentivize drug development to tackle antimicrobial resistance. The floor is yours, Professor.
Thank you very much, Hilde, and thank you for the invite to come back. So it's my absolute pleasure. Hello, everyone. Good morning. Thank you for attending. I'm assuming that you can see my slides and you can hear me. So
we hear you, we see your slide, and we see your arrow.
Brilliant. Okay, and you see my arrow. Perfect. So I leave the slides like this. So Hilde and George have both mentioned the issue of antimicrobial resistance, and some of you already put it in the list. But I mean, I am an optimist by nature, but with AMR, I have to admit that I'm a bit annoyed in the sense because I actually got involved for the first time with AMR issues in 2009, where Sweden was the president of the European Union at the time. Sweden has always been a good country in controlling AMR, stewardship, and they realized that we have a big problem. So they wanted to do something as a world leader in the space of AMR. So they organized this conference in 2009, precisely looking at new business models, new push and pull, what Hilda, you were talking about, to spur development and to encourage companies to basically come back or start with AMR. That was 2009. We're now 2025. We have seen bits and pieces already by some policymakers and countries at global level, which I'm going to put more information. Bottom line is that they are good news, but not good enough. And I think it's an excellent example also with orphan drugs that George was mentioning, but with antibiotics and AMR, this kind of complementarities at the end between state intervention and market. I think we've heard, and I am a big fan, although it might sound a bit kind of naive, these public-private partnerships in general for healthcare. But I do think this is not a matter of who should we have, the public or the private sector developing new medicines and antibiotics. It's how can both, and I'm assuming also charitable NGOs, how can we actually complement each other? And at the end, there's no one-size-fits-all solution, and we need to be innovative in the way we we actually do things. And I don't want to undermine sometimes we use innovation as too loose, maybe, but anyway. So with that, I just wanted to give that intro, Hilde, so that people understand why I'm here. And since 2009, I've been involved in working with even governments, and I will talk later with a lot of pharma companies. I've done a lot of work with them on this space, with WHO, with other stakeholders. So fascinating topic that we need to solve, full stop. Otherwise, we go back to the Middle Ages. And it's not me saying, Jorge, who is really no one talking that we can go to the Middle Ages back in 2025 after going through a COVID pandemic. But it's it is a big issue. So a bit before with numbers, some numbers just to show the magnitude of the problem. This was a great paper that I strongly recommend that you read, all of you, if you're interested, published a few years ago, which was basically estimating deaths associated with bacterial AMR and attributable to bacterial AMR. I mean, I won't go through all the technicalities here, but basically, bottom line, 1.7 million deaths around the world attributable to bacterial AMR, going up to 4.95 million associated with AMR. And there you see the differences between countries. And because this is a global problem, full stop. I mean, and we know bugs do travel around. And already back, and this is, I know it's old, but I like putting it because it's 2017, so 2013. Dame Sally Davis, which I've had the honor to meet a couple of times, who's wonderful, a wonderful person and an ambassador in the UK and in the world around AMR and doing something. So already and she was the chief medical officer at the time in the UK, and she did a lot of work on AMR. She was talking about post-antibiotic apocalypse, also the end of modern medicine, going back to the Middle Ages. Um, and actually, we don't do anything. This is a bit old, but it was actually a very important. They have a web page now. I mean, they don't update it because it's some years old. But this review on antimicrobial resistance, which was led by the UK, was basically looking at what I'm talking about today and what Hilde already alluded to, and George a bit in his references to AMR. And this was a very important document that I think actually helped activate policymakers. Again, working with some policymakers, we economists can be strange creatures, but politicians can be even more strange and how they react and how they work. But clearly, in my experience, and also looking at George with, even though I know he's there, uh, uh, policymakers do like numbers, and they like good numbers, and I think numbers can be very powerful to convince policymakers. So with that, I mean, I've already alluded this 1.27 million deaths associated and attributable. And this report was saying, well, if we don't do anything, by 2050, we're going to start losing 10 million lives each year, with a loss of a lot, 100 trillion US dollars. Okay, and becoming the most important. So Houston, we have a problem. But then if you actually look at the pipeline, and again, you've been hearing all this, that it takes complicated, takes time. Actually, I like to say that the medicines we have today, whether advanced orphan drugs, are actually the decisions made by people 10 years ago or 15 years ago, because this takes a long time. So the antibiotics we have actively in the pipeline being investigated, actually, not only they are very few, but also they don't seem to be that important in inverted commas. And again, if we need antibiotics, that doesn't mean that tomorrow the European Union puts in, or member states put some new policy, hopefully, and suddenly in 1 year we start getting a lot of antibiotics out of the blue. And it happened a bit with COVID, but that was COVID vaccine. But we knew already there was some historic research for vaccinations. And of course, the critical mass and the urgency of the problem, of course, cannot be compared with the AMR as of today. But still, this takes time. So why are we here? So I think I like to think about three types of challenges, and of course I'm going to focus on the economics because I am an economist. Uh, but if we focus on the science, all that research and development that we need to do to actually come up with a potential antibiotic or a medicine, um, it seems that actually success rates, are lower in antibiotics versus other therapy areas. So it's more complicated. Uh, in terms of the regulatory clinical dimension, I won't go into the detail, but there are big issues with trial designs and what patients you can use, and under what circumstances you can use the patients that would be suffering the resistance to include them in clinical trials. Also, superiority, which is very important, as we will see and as we've been discussing for HTA, health technology assessment. In a sense, if you want to have a higher price than your competitors, you need to prove superiority, right? Otherwise, why should you have a higher price? But for clinical trials for antibiotics, superiority is very difficult, and actually they try to show non-inferiority. So the evidence at launch is very limited. But then if we look at the economics, as probably you've been discussing, no, the normal business model is price times volume. 10 euros per pill, you sell 1 million pills, whatever, you have your 10 million. But what's the problem here? The problem with the new antibiotics is that with this traditional model of price times volume, because as what we're saying, we want to limit the use of antibiotics, the volume is going to be very, very, very small, or even non-existent, even in some years, because you want to use the antibiotic as a reserve. You don't want to, you just want to reserve it. So you want to have an antibiotic, you want to have a pipeline of antibiotics, you want to have antibiotics in the shelf, but you don't want to use them until they are really, really needed. And what's the problem with this traditional model that it neither encourages R&D because the volume reset is very small, so the returns for antibiotics are very, very small, and actually it does not generate appropriate use because companies are rewarded by volume, so they want to sell more. And hence, these effective stewardship programs, will limit the use. But then when we talk about HTA and economic evaluation and pricing and reimbursement, what's the problem? The problem is that and I mean, sometimes I know there's a lot of discussion whether a uniform or one-size-fits-all HTA model works for orphan drugs or for oncology drugs or for diabetes or now for obesity, etc. No, but actually, I do think and I very strongly that actually existing HTA models are not fit for purpose for valuing new antibiotics. And I will tell you a bit more about it later. And actually, finally, some countries, including the UK, leading the way with economic evaluations, actually they are changing their own standard model for antibiotics because they've realized they are different. They are different. And hence there's a lot of uncertainty and significant financial risk. Some numbers, you see some references. Basically, bottom line is about the economics, stupid, of course, not only, but basically we look at the returns because these are, as we were saying, companies have to make decisions whether they spend R&D investment on antibiotics or on something else. And resources are certainly not unlimited. We wish they were unlimited, but if they were unlimited, economics wouldn't exist. So, but anyway, if you compare the numbers, basically, for other areas other than antibiotics, companies make more money. So, we have a problem. And then going back to the issue of HTA, I mean, and I've been doing some work over many years now. There you have this table one that you have here, summary of elements. So what we're saying is in traditional HTA, you would be looking at health gain, unmet need, cost offsets, even maybe productivity benefits. But actually, we have here a battery of elements of value, which again, I'm not going to go into all the details, but they are certainly not benefits not included in traditional HTA. A couple of things to mention is this insurance value, as I was saying, to have something in reserve, so it's give you like an insurance, and also this enablement value, because let's not forget, I mean, antibiotics are not just, I mean, they're for treating infections, of course, but we use them also for some preventative use for surgeries, chemotherapy, etc. So again, if we cannot use, I don't want to be too pessimistic, but hip replacements, could be something very very dangerous now because of the high risk of infection. So what is the solution? So the concept is the linkage. And before I go into the concept of the linkage, so Hilde, you've gone through all this, so I won't go into the details between push and pull. The issue is for antibiotics, I would argue there is quite a lot of push incentives, which basically is trying, as we were saying, to push science forward and research grants. And so, it's enhancing the knowledge around the different infections, but not necessarily for like pull. But so we have a lot of push, but a bit fragmented. And then 1 second, sorry. I think. So if we're talking about pull, here you have the concept of the linkage, which is very straightforward, but is very complicated. So in red, you have this is kind of money, the red curve. So here you have all your R&D costs. If you're lucky, you get into marketing authorization. If you're luckier, you actually get a price and reimbursement condition in a country. You start selling via price times volume. You go up via patent, it expires, market exclusivity et al. You would have generics, biosimilars, and then gradually you will lose to generics. Fine. This is the traditional model. What we're saying basically is this shaded green area for antibiotics is extremely, extremely, extremely low, and this R&D can actually be quite high. So the concept is the linkage. So as we have here, what we're saying is, okay, we're going to give some rewards to the producer, irrespectively of whether he sells 10 units of antibiotic, 20 units, or 1 million units. And the concept here is that you can, as you can see, give the payment every so often for a limited number of years, or you get it in the first year, everything, the lump sum. So again, this is very new. I mean, okay, we have the concept of prices, of course, we said, but the concept of the linkage to pay for medicines, it's very new, if it has been used at all. But again, for antibiotics, I think it makes sense. And again, you were talking, Hilde, to George about the view of the industry. I mean, I do quite a lot of work with industry, and when this concept of the linkage came about, more than 10 years ago, uh, I know for certain that the industry was very against, because basically they were saying, "What? I'm going to lose the control of my product." Uh, you know, uh, but everyone realized that at the end is possibly the pool solution with other things for antibiotics. And now the industry is actually very supportive of this concept of the linkage. Took them a while, but they are there. And so I think this is an example of how minds of industry and policymakers have actually been evolving over time with good dialogue, trust, good work, background research, the numbers, showing the problem that actually, there's been quite a lot of work showing the problem. So what is this, the linkage? So this is the Drive AB report. It was a EU IMI project that was looking at the different push and pull incentives. Again, it's a bit old, but the concept is still the same. And the idea is that you can have 3 types of the linked models. One, you have figure 8 A, fully delinked. So basically very similar. Now you have the gray for everything R&D costs. The dark green is the linkage, this payment, and the light blue is, as they say, warm manufacturing payment. So somehow you get a bit of payment to cover your manufacturing cost. Okay, so this is one. Then you have 9, which is a partially delinked, as you can see here. Let me get the camera, otherwise I can see. You have going, as you can see here, fully delinked because is the same figure, and they only get revenues from the delinked. Partially delinked is now they have a bit of additional payments in light blue, and the red green, sorry, the dark green is those the linkage payments, and then you have a potentially delinked reward, but sales adjusted. You get the same every year, but the payment you receive comes from either from both this the linkage or the normal sales. Okay, so these are the concepts. Um, what are we talking about in terms of numbers? So again, I won't go into the details. You have all the references there, but again, and we've been talking already how much it costs to research and develop a new medicine. I've got actually a paper, a report from some years trying to estimate all the massive work that I'm sure you're familiar now, the work from the people from LSE. So this is looking at the R&D cost. So in terms of how much money would companies need as a reward to actually cover the R&D cost and be able to generate a sufficient net present value. No, what we're talking is between 2 and 4 billion US dollars. No, and this paper by Kevin Outterson, Kevin is one of the people that know more about AMR and antibiotics in the world. He actually has a bit of and he's a professor of law at Boston BU, but he also leads, which is what's in the previous slide, CARBEX, which is basically push funding for SMEs, which has been very successful. So this is the money we're talking about. So I mean, again, with all this context, what do we know? What should we want for the kind of these kind of pull incentives in terms to generate this sustainable R&D in antibiotics? So it has to be targeted. Of course, we do need, and again, there's quite a bit of work differentiating the priorities according to the level of resistance within certain bugs. This is work done by the WHO, and they talk about critical, urgent. So certainly, if resources are limited, public resources are limited. So with these kind of incentives, we do need to target for key public health priorities. Has to be sustainable, of course. This is no brainer. This kind of fundings cannot be subject to budget changes, and we can see what happens in many cases where there's a change in government. Has to be transparent, of course, in terms of what to expect, who is eligible, etc. Has to be sufficient, as we see. It has to be supportive, and here important also to ensure we can at the end, and it's part of what George was saying with the change of the legislation, that this access, the unequal access to medicines in Europe is something the European Commission doesn't like, for good reasons. Sometimes they go a bit wild and try to convince member states to do something that it's under their competencies and they don't want to give it away. So they will listen or not to the European Union, as we know. And this is important for the transferable exclusivity vouchers, I will say later. In terms of, I'm just conscious of time, so I'll skip through this. I mean, there's quite a few types of pull incentives, but going back to reimbursement, because I want to talk about some of the experiences with countries. And I have to say in advance that I do need to go at 11:30 on the spot, and I cannot stay for the question, sorry, but via emails or whatever, or via Hilde, you can ask me what you want, and I'll try to answer if I can, of course. So, again, the LSC, the observatory, has been doing a lot of work on antibiotics. Again, for the 2009 conference that I mentioned before, they were also involved. And I think bottom line here is, again, it's not like, as I was saying before, public or private, no sector who should develop medicines. And here is not what should we use? Should we use push or pull? No, we should use push and pull. And actually, in the work that Hilde, you mentioned the WHO report, so thank you for referencing that. We do talk about push pull also, and also coordination and collaboration, because that's very important. We just think about push and pull. At the end, we miss joining the dots that you also mentioned a few times. And with push and pull, I think they are complementary, and we need to use a mix of incentives. So some examples, because I think so again, 2009 all started. We get in there. What are countries actually doing? First of all, there was some good news even in 2020 in the US. This famous, if you're in the area of AMR, but which is still to see the light, is the so-called Pasteur Act, because basically what they are talking about is a subscription style model, which, if you think about it, is a linkage model, because basically what you're doing with a subscription style model is you pay X amount per to the company per year, and you can use the antibiotic when you want it without any additional payment. There might be some, as I was saying, some cost to cover the marginal cost of production, but the idea is a subscription style. No, this has been referred to the famous Netflix model, although I don't like the concept of a Netflix model for antibiotics, because for me semantics are important. Because with Netflix, basically the idea is that you are using the movie, you're watching so many movies at the same, over a month, no, that actually it will be very expensive, no, to pay every time five euros per movie, and if you watch 20 movies, it'd be so. The subscription style is a bit like, we are aware that you are going to use it a lot. So, we want to give you a fixed price per year or per month, no, so that, your demand is not affected by the price. What happens with antibiotics? With antibiotics, we don't want to use it. So I prefer to call it a subscription style model rather than as a Netflix model, because anyway, for semantics, but still, the subscription style, I think, and in the US with this Pasteur Act, in addition to other things, they were arguing for a subscription style model for antibiotics. It never happened. In 2023, it got reintroduced again by these two senators. And again, no, you have here antibiotics make modern medicine possible, and the US is at risk of losing these critical drugs. So, I think people are, and policymakers are aware that we have a problem. So this is the US again, 2023. We're in 2025. It still has not seen the light, but these two senators are not. So Michael Bennet and Todd Young, I don't think they're still giving up. So, which is good news. So the UK, as you've all been, I'm sure you've heard about NICE, about the UK, what NICE does. But what did the UK realize? So again, and I was actually involved in the initial discussions to set up this model. So it was the UK, like Sweden, had always been very good in controlling antibiotics. If you've ever lived in the UK, having access to an antibiotic is very complicated, very complicated if you don't have a prescription. In Spain and other Mediterranean countries, 10, 15 years ago, you would just go to the pharmacy and buy it without a prescription and you would get it. This has changed, fortunately, especially in Spain. Done a very good job. But anyway, so in the UK, they realized again, after the few years after the Swedish conference, that and at the time I was working at OIT, and we actually put in a table in a meeting people from NICE, Sally Davis, academics, industry, and actually NICE realized, oh damn, we because NICE did not really assess antibiotics, but when they heard all about this about antibiotics after 2010, they said, oh, we have a problem and our system is not fit for purpose. So we need to do something about it. So 2015, the first kind of the dialogue between the different agents, and here we're talking industry via ABPI, which is the trade association, and I was kind of their economist in the discussion. We had NHS, we had NICE, Public Health England at the time, industry, some academics, because they realized that something had to be done. So what did they do? They created this what they call this pilot after 7 years. That the idea is rather than generating a traditional cost per quality, you know, they actually try to estimate the number of qualities that the new antibiotics could generate over the lifetime, because because that was the idea. They realized, the value of antibiotics goes beyond, the quality effect on the patient who takes uh, the medicine. And I think this is very important for also for vaccines, and that's why for vaccines sometimes HTA models are also different, not because you have the spillovers, but traditional HTA just looks at the effect on the patient that takes the drug or the family or the carers. But what we're saying here, no, antibiotics does not just benefits the patient that takes the antibiotic, but it has all these other dimensions. So they came up with this pilot that you have here. This is all one. I mean, I'm a bit annoyed with the UK, of course, with Brexit and all the rest, but one thing is that they tend to be at least more transparent than Mediterranean countries in terms of the decision making. So all this is public. They signed a deal, as you see there, in 2022 for two new antimicrobial drugs. And the idea is what they did. They created this new model of health technology assessment, as I was saying, not looking at the generation of qualities beyond the patient. And then they did, and the idea was not that there would be a lump sum payment every year per year for the next 10 years for the company, irrespectively of how many units of antibiotics the company would sell. And that lump sum payment per year for the next 10 years was dependent on this quality calculation that I was alluding to before. No? So they calculated the value of antibiotics, these two antibiotics, in a very novel and different way to the standard calculation of qualities. Then they said, okay, up to 10 million euros, sorry, pounds per year for the next 10 years. You can get up to 10 million, and that up to 10 million depends on the value on your value, which has been estimated by the quality gains estimated. So they had these two pilots with these two medicines, as we say here, world first pilot. But they realized that this is very complicated, that generating qualities for antibiotics along the lifetime, along these new dimensions that I was talking about, the investment, the spectrum, etc., is actually very complicated. Surprise, surprise. So what they decided, and they also realized that actually the 10 million was probably low to generate some good funding. So they came out with a public consultation, and they've changed the model. And I think with NICE, I mean, again, I've been following NICE very carefully. I know nice people from NICE. Not that not other people from NICE are not nice, but you know what I mean. I know, and Nikra, for instance, here, who's been leading all the work on AMR. He was part of the meeting that I told you about. So now I know nice too well, and one thing they do is that they are if they see that they need to change something, they will change it. And over time, you realize how nice, they started with these 20 to 30,000 pounds per quali, and then 20, 30, 40 years ago for the statins and all this, which worked well. Suddenly they realize oncology drugs do not fit, so they end up doing end of life, and now they do, they keep adapting the system. And with antibiotics, they change the system completely. So they said, okay, we need to do something. This way of estimating quality is very complicated. This lump sum payment per year is small. So what are we going to do? We're going to do two things. We're going to increase the the app. We're going to now have a range of payments, depending, and as we will see. And now what we're going to do is we're going to do a multi-criteria decision analysis. And you have some kind of points-based scoring system. Rather than generating qualies, estimating qualies, what you're going to do is, as you will see now, there's going to be some criteria, and then the antibiotics that want to go through this new model, we will rate them, we will point them, we will score them, and then according to the score, you have so much return. No? And just to say that this multi-criteria, what we have here, the steady values, which is the spectrum, transmission, that I mentioned before, diversity insurance. Again, this comes back from the work that OHE started back in with that report that I mentioned, when they realized that we had to do something else. So what they have is actually a multi-criteria decision analysis, as you can see. Around three main categories. One is the relative effectiveness and unmet need clinical need of the mechanism of the pathogen that is against, so the antibiotic is against, the pharmacological benefit of the antibiotic, and also very important, which and links and has 30% of the weight, is what they called health system benefit. Remember, as I said before, the traditional HTA will probably look about this, no? Unmet need, oncology, rare diseases, some countries do some kind of priorities according to unmet need. So the first two boxes would be the tradition, you could argue would be a bit like the traditional HTA, even though when we're talking about pharmacological benefit, you can see here that the benefits of antibiotics can be different from a traditional medicine. And this kind of health system benefit, I think this is where it comes, the effects, trying to actually value dimensions of an antibiotic beyond the effect on the patient who is taking the medicine. As you can see now here, now there are four bands between 20 million and 5 million per year. Before they only had this 10 million. No? And as what they say, depending on your score, you would get, from 20 to 5 million. No? And the score, remember, is based on this, which is difficult also to do, but is, I guess, simpler to do than estimating the qualities generated in the antibiotics lifetime. Sweden has also done some new. Sorry, one second. Has done new subscription pool models from some years ago. Here is a bit different because basically what they try to do is not per se to encourage the development of new antibiotics, but actually keeping approved antibiotics available on the Swedish market. Because sometimes, due to economic reasons, I mean, I'm not talking about lack of efficacy, but for some economic reasons, and Hilde, you mentioned drug repurposing, some medicines are actually cheap as peanuts, or well, peanuts can be expensive relative to antibiotics. And this is a problem, no? Because at the end, we are used to be paying, and I'm sure all of you, if not most of you, in your lifetime has taken an antibiotic. And if you remember how much what was the price, irrespective whether you paid copayment or not, we're talking cents, nearly cents of euros. So very, very cheap. So what they did here, and again, Sweden is like a bit of like a federal country, like Spain or Italy, where they do national decision making, but actually budgets are held at county council level, at regional level. So what did they do? Well, the interesting thing is they also guaranteed this annual revenue, this the linkage payment. But the interesting here between the governments and the regions, and if you are in a federal type country, you know that discussions with national and regional are a nightmare. Well, like we have the analogy is Europe, no, Europe and countries is the same thing. It's a similar thing, but here they got into an agreement because of the importance of antibiotics. They said, no, we're going to give you, don't worry, we're going to give you the same every year for the next 10 years. And, if you don't have enough from your revenues, which is the green, sorry, green, the gray, don't you worry, the national level will will top up to the blue line. So this is good news. The not so good news is that, sorry, the not so good news is that, oops, um, uh, amounts, that red line are really very low, 4 million SEK. I don't remember now exactly. I don't know if there's any Swedish people here, but I mean, we're talking few thousand euros, I think. Very little, very little. But I mean, again, I am an optimist by nature, so I mean, it's better than nothing. And there seems, the industry, kind of, as you can see, they've done an evaluation. They're mostly positive, of course, with the caveat that the funding is low. Canada, and there's now some countries, and I'll be finishing off in 3 minutes. What a lot of countries are doing as we speak, or have done, is actually they realize, Houston, we have a problem. What do they do? They do kind of a bit of a expert group, usually international. They look at the problem and they recommend solutions. In all cases, in all countries, and I will show you a handful of them, basically they say push and pull, but pull is what we need to do. Okay, pull is what we need to do here. We need to bear that in mind. So here is Canada, and they've published their recommendations, so they're working on it. Japan, likewise, they've done a similar thing. They created a group. They looked at policy recommendations, and as you can see here, one of 7 incentive laws establish incentive models to encourage R&D for antimicrobials, no, and talking about pull incentives in particular, including transferable exclusivity and extensions. So you have there with some money. In Spain, we're working on it. I have to say I do like lobbying, so part of it is trying to companies and government to talk about this, and there's quite a lot of work. I get along really well with the Spanish agency, and actually, now they're even talking about pull incentives, which is really good. France and Germany, what they're doing is they adapt their pricing and reimbursement systems, basically to provide that antibiotics are deemed more valuable and hence can get a higher price. And last but not least, which has been mentioned, and I know I have a couple of minutes, I just want to say, so this is the transferable exclusivity voucher. I think what I want to say here is, I think, two things. One is that the European Commission said that this transferable data exclusivity voucher is actually a temporary measure. That really, what countries should do is at national level, they should do this kind of revenue guarantees, the linkage models, market entry was what we were discussing before. This is the linkage. And I personally, and I've said this in public, personally, I actually see that the transferable voucher is like a stick from the European Union to the member states for not doing anything at country level to sort out the AMR problem. We have the UK doing a bit, we've done Sweden a bit, but there's no really systematic use of the linkage pool models for antibiotics. So, in a sense, this is easy for the European Union to implement this voucher. They don't have to change law in a sense. They might need to do bits and pieces, but it's relatively simple. Doesn't cost the commission money. And, then the companies, the country would have to deal with, and let's be honest, it will be, if you're lucky, one or two antibiotics per year. Or well, out of the 10 years, maybe we have three antibiotics in total that will be subject to this voucher. We're not going to get, as I said before, we're not going to get suddenly out of the blue in 26, 27, and over the next 10 years, one new antibiotic every year. No, no way, no way. So I think this is, you might like it, not like it. I know there's complaints about generics, countries paying more for generics, but sorry, paying for one or two drugs, the Keytrudas of the world or whatever, an extra year of monopoly prices. But at least in Europe, there are what we call guardrails, so you can actually limit the amount of money the companies could make from selling from that extra 12 months of an oncology drug or a rare disease drug or whatever. So that is the first thing. And actually, we are not that very in Europe. We know that actually the generic uptake is very unequal. So especially in the first year, so maybe we might not be um, losing that much. Um, so with that, I think final reflections. We need to use political momentum. I keep saying this is 2009, but still, I think there is more political momentum now. That's for sure. Push incentives, I don't think are the problem per se, although we need to improve the coordination. We need to focus on these pool the linkage models. We need to stop doing pilots and we need to scale up, I think, now. And we need to coordinate. And actually, we have to do it fast because if not, I don't want to go to the Middle Ages. So with that, I will finish. I will stop sharing the slides if I can.
Thank you so much, Professor Jorge Mestre. I'm very happy with the talk you gave. I know you need to run for another meeting, but I just wanted to thank you indeed. You already towards the end alluded to the One Health concept, which the students will be introduced to in the coming modules.
Great.
And definitely, I think the fragmentation in Europe is an issue. And well, I think for the push incentive, we also need to fund more the monitoring and detection of antimicrobial
Well,
resistance because we really face an issue there. Um, are there very burning questions from the students? I didn't see anything coming in, and otherwise, I will leave you to run to your next appointment. And thank you so much. And if there are questions coming in afterwards, maybe the others can help.
I think
But
George wants to
otherwise,
ask. George, do you want to ask a quick question?
No, I just wanted to say goodbye.
Ah, I was worried that you were going to ask me a question.
thank you so much,
My
Professor,
pleasure.
for your
Good luck with
time.
the
So
students.
much.